Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how you can make up guitar parts right on the spot that sounds like they've been specifically composed for the song. We're going to use a combination of chord tones and passing tones. I'm going to show you how to use it with both octaves and single notes. Let's go ahead and play some parts of the track, and then we'll get right into the teaching where I'll show you how to play this note for note. Here we go. Alright, so there you go. Now, a word of advice before we get into the lesson. Those parts aren't meant to be like a solo part or like a hook line that's going to really stand out in the intro of a song. Those are more the kind of parts that you'll play even behind the vocal or just at different parts of the song without really aiming to make a big deal out of it. But as you can see, those parts had melody in them, it had nice movement in them, it had some melodic contour in those, and the chord tones that I played, they perfectly aligned together. Now a part like that is super easy just to make up right on the spot, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly give you the thinking behind it. Then you can see how to apply the same technique and the same concept using chord tones and passing tones, whether you're playing those with octaves or single notes. Alright, so let's dive right into this. That progression you heard in the beginning was basically a 1-4 progression. That's the natural numbering system, and it means it's G to C in the key of G major. If you want to learn about the natural numbering system, we've got a video linked to you in the description that explains that whole process to you from start to finish. But in any case, our chords there were G and C. And you saw that I played a line in the low part of the neck, the middle part of the neck, as well as the higher part of the neck. And those same lines can be played from octaves as well as single notes. I'm going to demo both of those for you right now. So when we played over G, I played this. That's a nice part. It has some movement, it has tells a bit of a story, and I can also play that as a single note. So as you can see, that exact same line can also be played as single notes. So where do those notes come from? Well, there's a simple rhythmic pattern that I'm using for all three of these, and then there's a simple approach as it relates to your chord tones. Now it helps if you know the notes of your triads. A triad is simply if I play G like this or C. Both of those are simple triads. Now you can either play a full chord like I've just done, or you can play G as this, or C like that. Those are triads. We've done many lessons around those. But it's not enough to really just know the shapes. If you know the notes within those triads, then what's really great about it is you now know individual notes that's going to fit perfectly over the chord. So if we look at G major, my notes are G, B, and D. So when I play G like that, it's simply G, B, and D. Alright, those are my notes, G, B, and D, all over the guitar neck. So I can take octaves, for example, and I go from one chord tone to another. So in the instance that I played B to D, or I played D to G, or I played G to B. So can you see it's simply starting on a chord tone and then going up to the next chord tone. So in the instance of G, if I look at this, at that arpeggio, it's B to D, or I can go D to G, or I can go D to B. And if I add some delay to that, it's going to sound like this. So B to D, or D to G, or G to B. That's essentially what I did when I played that line. The only difference is I added a passing tone. So instead of just going B, B, D, I played B, C, E. Or instead of just playing D, G, I played D, F sharp, G. And for the highest one, instead of just going G, B, I went like this, G, A, B. So that's where I put my passing tone. Now, a passing tone in this instance is a note that is not a chord tone. So it's simply a note in between your two chord tones. So think of it as a stepping stone. So I can go from B to D. Both of those are in my G major triad, but then I can add C as a passing tone. What that does, it adds a little bit of tension and a little bit of movement. Or if I do it here, or if I do it over here. That's the idea, where I either start on the B note, or the D note, or the G note. Those are my notes of my G major triad. But I can do the same for C. The notes within a C triad is C, E, and G. C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G. Those are the notes that make up C major. So now I can play C to E, or E to G, or G to C. But if I just play chord tones, so those are my safe notes. So instead of just sticking on the chord tones, I'm also going to add in that passing tone. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If I start on E, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If I start on G, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So can you see how those lines perfectly fit over the chords? What I'm going to do, now that you have a bit more of an understanding that I'm going from one chord tone to the next, using the notes of the triad, and I'm inserting a note in between as a passing tone, and I'm playing it over G, and then I play the same idea over C, using these octaves. Let's play the track once more. I'll play it one more time, and then afterwards I'm going to show you the rhythm and give you some advice on how you can do this for your own playing. Let's check it out. So that right there is just a simple idea that I've just done there, going from one chord tone to another using a passing tone in between. So where do you find the chord tones? Well, those are the notes of your triad. And where do you find the passing tones? Well, that's the note within the scale that lands between, that connects the two chord tones right there. Now my rhythm that I'm using is quite simple. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. When you have a repetitive rhythm like that, it really settles in the notes that you are playing, because it's ultimately the rhythm that you play brings your notes to life. Many times when people play parts on the guitar, they either play too many notes or they don't have a solid repetitive rhythm, or at least a rhythmic motif that they are playing, and that means doesn't matter how many notes you play, it's not going to make an impact. So if you take that idea that I've just done with that rhythm that I've just played, it basically gives you that example. So you can start it on B, C, or start it on D, E for C major, start on the G note, stay on the G, B, C for the C major chord. And that's how I played over those two chords. There's many differences within that you can do when you play these parts, but it's a great way to get notes, number one, that's going to fit over the chords perfectly. Gets a rhythm that suits the track that you're playing over, that's repetitive, that makes the listeners able to catch on to that melody that you're playing, because you're really presenting it in the right way. And then it's really up to you how you want to play these things in your own playing, but that's what I want to recommend and suggest to you. Instead of just playing a power chord or an open chord or a 4/2 voicing, you can start on any one of the three notes. You have G, B and D, G, B, D, G, B, D. You can start on any one of those three notes and then you can just go ahead and use those passing tones in between. What I'm going to do as another example is I'm going to take that same idea that we've just played there, and I'm going to play it over another progression, which is 1, 4, 6, 5. This time it's a 4 chord within the progression, as opposed to just 2 chords that we've just played. And then listen to how that same idea can be used. Of course, you won't play that like I'm doing all over the neck. You'll start one area and then you'll kind of develop the motif as you go. But for teaching purposes, I'm going to play single notes now, and I'm going to start in the low area of the neck, the middle area, and the high area, playing that same idea over a different progression.
3,
Let's check
4.
this out. Right, let me play that one more time, but this time I'm going to use octaves.
3,
Check it out.
4.
So it's a super simple concept, taking 2 chord tones, connecting it with a passing tone, and then using that specific rhythm. You can feel free to experiment. Instead of just using that same rhythm, you can use a different rhythm. Obviously, the rhythm that I'm using fits in with the drum groove that I'm playing here. And because I'm choosing certain accents within the bar that aligns with what the drums are doing, it also gives more power to the rhythm because the whole band is playing that same thing. So that's why as a guitar player, it's important for you to listen to what the drums are doing, what the bass is doing, what the overall rhythmic vibe is. Then you slot in with that, and you can then also focus in on what the piano is doing in terms of voicings, and then find something that's going to complement that. It might be a 4/2 voicing, it might be an octave, it might be a power chord, it might be an open chord. That's where your ear comes into play, because you can listen to what's going on you can use your knowledge of the guitar and then make decisions accordingly to bring in the colors and the vibe that you want as it comes to composing guitar parts on the spot. And ultimately, I think that's one of the coolest ways to play worship guitar. Then you can just be in the moment and you can respond without having to come and play any preset parts. Now, of course, there are some songs like Lion and the Lamb, for example, that you kind of have to play the intro line, and that basically that first line that I just played there is two chord tones connected with a non-chord tone. So that same idea applies there. Play those hooks, play those familiar parts when you do well-known songs, but for the rest of it, have the ability to make up things on the spot. I think that really leans itself well to the creative nature of coming up with guitar parts, and it's way more fulfilling to play like that. Otherwise, you are just kind of, you know, being a parrot where you just do note for note reproduction of what you've already heard. And think about conversations when you talk to your friends or anybody, you make it up on the spot. You don't always, you know, do something that has been pre-planned. And whenever you have a pre-planned thing that you have to say, for a lot of people that causes some stress and anxiety because it's normally a speech or something that you have to deliver in a public setting, and you have to remember what you're going to say and how to say it, and it's just too much thinking about the doing. So instead of thinking too much about it, you want to get to a space where you can just be in the moment and play without thinking, because when you remove the thinking, your playing is going to be way more alive and vibrant and electric, so to speak. And unfortunately, the way that you get to that just requires practice. So you have to think in the beginning, you have to practice a lot, get the ideas down. But once you have it, you can forget about all that stuff and just be there in the moment and respond accordingly. So there you go, guys. That's a cool, simple way that you can use to come up with really cool guitar parts, connecting chord tones with non-chord tones as a passing tone. You'll learn a lot out of that. If you want to go ahead and figure out the fretboard puzzle as it relates to understanding the different connections and intervals within these triads, go ahead and check out this video, and then I'll see you soon in the next one. Cheers.